EU's Kallas says that any US-Russia peace deal on Ukraine must include Kiev and the EU. Netanyahu vows to eliminate Hamas strongholds in Gaza, outlines post-war vision. Jordan to host the joint meeting with Syria and the US on rebuilding efforts. And I'm Salma El-Fiki, and those are the headlines, and now the news in detail. The EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has said that any peace deal between Washington and Moscow to end the war in Ukraine must include Ukraine and the European Union. She announced she will convene a meeting of the European foreign ministers on Monday to discuss the next steps. The US has the power to force Russia to negotiate seriously. Any deal must include Ukraine and the EU as it concerns their security, Kallas said in a statement. And the White House is considering inviting Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to Alaska, where President Donald Trump plans to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin. While no invitation has been finalized, U.S. officials say a trilateral summit remains a possibility and express hope it will happen. The White House is currently focused on planning the Trump-Putin bilateral meeting, with no official comment from Kiev yet. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has expressed strong support for a joint statement by European leaders for calling a fair end to the war in Ukraine, while safeguarding both Ukrainian and European security interests. And in a message on Telegram, Zelensky thanked those standing with Ukraine in pursuit of peace, saying the end of the war must be fair, defending the vital security interests of our European nations. The statement issued Saturday was signed by key European figures, including French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And for more analysis, we now move to Mona in our newsroom. Mona.
Thank you so much, Salma. And for further analysis, we're joined from Moscow by the writer and political researcher, Dr. Asif Mulhim. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me start by asking you, is it possible to reach a final agreement to end the war between Russia and Ukraine during the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska?
Good afternoon, and for you and for your audience. I don't think, ma'am, there's something will be a fair and inclusive peace agreement will end the root conflict. We're in front of a agreement, maybe a transitional agreement, not more than that. What this includes, what the proposals made by Putin include. In Moscow, he proposed the Ukraine withdrawal of Donbass lands, the two Lugansk and Donetsk provinces. Of course, Russia annexed both, but there's still some western areas in Donetsk, and also ending this war, the fire in the southern area. The remainers of these two provinces in the south will not be recognized as Ukraine sovereignty, but it will freeze the war there only. On the return, Russia will withdraw from these two holds in the south, and they are very minor areas with no significance at all, comparing to the area Ukraine will withdraw from in Donbass. And there is also other details in regards to the punishments and the Ukraine position, will it be in NATO or not? There's also other details still unclear. This is why we think the meeting between the Trump-Putin meeting will not lead to solve all the problems or the conflicts, but it's a kind of postponing the conflict. But there is no timeline yet because Trump wants semi-elections, and he needs to show his political activities and that he ended the war in a way or another.
Too many sticking points indeed in Alaska or ahead of Alaska there. But the United States, do you think it will really invite Zelensky to the Alaska meeting?
Ma'am, I think according to my understanding to what is going on, Putin himself doesn't want to sit with Zelensky. The same applies to Trump. I can say that I don't say that he hates Zelensky, but he doesn't like it because Zelensky causes problems to Trump in many areas, like in his first term, that led to punishing Trump himself. And he also visited some Democrats areas, and he supported the Democrats. This is why he is not welcomed either by Putin or Trump himself. So both of them will sit together and will draw a detailed peace agreement without the attendance of Zelensky, although its existence is relevant. And Trump said that we has to show, or the European side in this talks. Anyways, I said it's would be a interim agreement to the interest of Russia, of course, just for the Trump to say that he ended a more than 3-year-old war.
Right. From your point of view, what is the reason behind the shift in the European perspective on what is happening in Ukraine?
Ma'am, in regards to Europe, Europe has security concerns towards Russia. There is a concern that the war may extend to other European lands. This is why besieging or restricting the war inside Ukraine will be a helpful factor for it. This is why they insist to support more weapons to Ukraine. This is why also it was said, after all these rumors around the new consensus, that Europe will continue supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. This is why Europe supports the war in Ukraine, any option against Russia. And their hope is great if there's a confrontation in the future between Russia and Ukraine, or Russia and NATO countries. Russia will be in its weakest forms. This is why it's a transitional agreement, because Russia needs this agreement as a rest, because on the background of its war inside Ukraine, there was many weakened points, though it's beneficial for it economically and politically from this rest or agreement.
Right, that was Dr. Asaf Mulhim, the writer and political researcher from Moscow. We thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews, and get back to you, Selma, in our studio.
Thank you, Mona. Major European leaders have emphasized that the future of peace in Ukraine must involve Kiev directly, with negotiations contingent on a ceasefire or reduction in hostilities. And in a joint statement, the leaders of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Finland, and the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, stressed the importance of combining active diplomacy with continued military and financial support to Ukraine. And they said the current line of contact should be the starting point of negotiations, underscoring Ukraine's sovereignty and the right to choose its own destiny. European leaders reaffirmed their commitment to Ukraine's territorial integrity and security, warning that any diplomatic solution must protect vital Ukrainian and European interests. And global attention turns to Alaska as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare for a high-stakes talks on Ukraine's conflict, with Kyiv and Western allies voicing firm opposition to Moscow's demands.
U.S. President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin are scheduled to meet on August 15th in Alaska to discuss ending the conflict with Ukraine, confirmed by both the Kremlin and the White House. Russian media described the venue as logical. They framed the talks as a chance to negotiate a ceasefire, potentially involving recognition of Moscow's control over occupied territories and limits on Ukraine's NATO ambitions. Kyiv has strongly rejected these terms. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed Ukraine will not gift its land and stressed that any peace must be decided with Ukraine's direct participation. The Ukrainian presidential office reiterated that the country's territorial integrity is protected by its constitution and that no deal can be made without Kyiv at the table. European leaders and EU officials have voiced caution, insisting that any settlement must have Ukraine's consent. Diplomatic coordination between Kyiv and European capitals is ongoing ahead of the summit. Washington says it's open to broader formats, possibly including Zelensky, but planning remains fluid. U.S. and international diplomats urge that any ceasefire must be backed by security guarantees. With the summit's geopolitical symbolism under scrutiny, the world awaits to see if Alaska will bring a breakthrough or deepen divides.
And we now move on to the latest developments in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that the military will move to eliminate what he called Hamas's remaining strongholds in Gaza City and central Gaza refugee camps, including El Mawasi. And speaking in occupied Jerusalem, Netanyahu said Hamas's refusal to disarm has left Israel with no choice but to complete the job and defeat the group after nearly 2 years of war. Netanyahu also laid out 5 principles for ending the war: the disarmament of Hamas, the release of all Israeli detainees, a fully demilitarized Gaza, firm Israeli security control over the territory, and the establishment of a non-Israeli civil administration. The Prime Minister reiterated Israel's intent to maintain a security buffer zone along the Gaza border and confirmed that Gaza would remain under Israeli oversight post-conflict.
This is the best way to end the war and the best way to end it speedily. And we will do whatever it takes to defend our country and defend our people, defend our future. We will win the war, with or without the support of others. But first, designating rather safe corridors for aid distribution. You can go, you can drive trucks there, and you'll be safe. Second, increasing the number of safe distribution points managed by the Gazan humanitarian foundations. And 3, airdrops. That's airdrops done by humanitarian foundations. And 3, airdrops. That's airdrops done by the Israeli.
Britain, Denmark, France, Greece and Slovenia condemned Israel's plan to seize Gaza City, warning it risks violating international law and endangering civilians. They urged Israel to reverse the decision immediately and lift restrictions on aid to prevent further humanitarian disaster. The UK said the military escalation will deepen suffering and displacement without securing hostage releases. France condemned the plan's severe humanitarian impact and called for a permanent ceasefire and open crossings for aid.
including the remaining hostages, and result in further unnecessary suffering. And we are clear that Hamas must disarm and play no future role, no future part in the governance of Gaza, where the Palestinian Authority must have a central role. But this decision by the Israeli government will do nothing to secure the return of the hostages and risk further endangering their lives.
And Jordan will host a joint Jordanian-Syrian-American meeting on Tuesday to discuss support for Syria's rebuilding efforts. The Jordanian Foreign Ministry announced the meeting will include Syrian Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shibani, U.S. Syria envoy Thomas Barak, and the U.S. ambassador to Turkey. And for astronauts from NASA's Crew 10 mission safely splashed down off the California coast after spending 146 days aboard the International Space Station. Commander Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers and Japanese astronaut Takuya Onishi and the Russian cosmonaut Kirill Peskov returned to Earth in a Dragon capsule following a 17.5-hour journey. The crew launched in March to replace the previous team and completed over 200 experiments during their 5-month rotation, delivering important time-sensitive research from the microgravity environment. Italian firefighters are battling a major wildfire on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, prompting the closure of all hiking trails in the national park near Naples. And the blaze, which erupted on Friday, has scorched parts of the park, with 12 firefighting teams and 6 Canadair aircraft deployed to contain it. Drones are being used to track the fire's progression, and reinforcements from other regions are en route, the National Fire Service said. The park has suspended all visitor access to ensure safety and support firefighting efforts. Despite the fire, nearby tourist site Pompeii remains open, though smoke is visible from the ruins. A unique Mediterranean coral reef in Croatia's national park is facing serious threats from rising water temperatures and invasive algae. Scientists report that summer temperatures now reach 29 degrees for weeks, causing coral bleaching and tissue damage. Invasive algae species also threaten to overgrow and suffocate the coral, and the park has introduced strict protection measures to help preserve the reef and its diverse marine life. And after 2 years of severe drought, Spain's Fuente de Piedra lagoon has resumed flamingo breeding, with 600 chicks fitted with identification rings, and volunteers guided the chicks into pens to band them for tracking as they migrate to natural reserves across Europe and North Africa. Experts say the lagoon is vital for flamingo conservation, but warn that Mediterranean wetlands face ongoing threats from drought and water extraction. A crucial section of Provincial Highway 104 in Yozong County, Gansu Province, has reopened following urgent repairs after severe flood damage. Heavy rains on Thursday triggered flash floods and mudslides, destroying parts of the highway and forcing drivers to take a 70-kilometer detour. instead of the usual 20-kilometer route. Emergency crews worked around the clock, clearing debris and installing temporary bridges. The reopening now allows heavy rescue equipment and personnel to reach the hardest hit villages, accelerating relief efforts. And now we go live to follow a news conference by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay. And try at the same time canceling the other partners to not to recruit them. Your question is wrong. We didn't ratify any ground land recruitments. There is a legal law allows us to recruit soldiers or reserve soldiers. Let me tell you, before when I say that we have to recruit 100,000 soldiers. In the beginning, I told the leaders of the army, we said we are not in a fight, in a war. We need to recruit 300 or 400,000. And after that, we recruited 80,000. There was a discussion, but now it's different. We came back to the legal framework that allows us to recruit the reserve in the way we want, not with just to stop recruiting. We have law gives us 10,000 religious recruited soldiers in 2 years, and who's opposed that do not want to recruit religious soldiers. There is political reasons hinder us from doing this. There is clear sanctions for those who are not recruited or do not want to recruit. I paid several of the first religious unit, and I was really inspired of the spirit after killing dozens of fighters in Gaza, and there were tens of religious soldiers. I'm looking to recruit them. This is the first part. In regards to the second part, the law will take some time, and I insist on passing this the resolution. Haven't you looked into the eyes of the hostages' families? I don't want to comment on something said in the cabinet were inaccurate. I think unless we do this, the hostages will be at risk. And we have invaded civilian areas successfully, and there were lessons we learned. We talked in details on the ways to stop any risk for any hostages. We have smart decisions to do so. I don't think your question was clear in the first and second part. Two questions on March a year ago and a half. You said in a video that we cannot fulfill victory without the army invading Rafah to eliminate the remainers of Hamas, and in a CBS interview you will end the war in a week.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu states that he is determined to end the war with a decisive victory and has ordered the military to take control of Gaza City. He confirmed that the Israeli army has been instructed to seize Hamas's remaining strongholds and asserted that most of the territory in Gaza is now under Israeli control, with Hamas's production and manufacturing infrastructure destroyed. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. EU's Kallas says that any US-Russia peace deal on Ukraine must include Kiev and the EU. Netanyahu vows to eliminate Hamas's strongholds in Gaza and outlines the post-war vision. And Jordan to host a joint meeting with Syria and the US on rebuilding efforts. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.